Our second reading today is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. He entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zaccheaus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zaccheaus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zaccheaus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." My name is Zaccheaus. I used to be a troll. Not the kind in children's stories. The real kind. Ugly, mean, self-centered. I never fit in anywhere, so it was easy to be a tax collector. As a child, I don't know what it was, that there was something about me that just made me attractive to bullies. And they found me. They found me again and again and again. I was shorter and not very good with physical things. I couldn't play sports like the other kids. Frankly, I was kind of ugly. And everyone saw that, and I was an easy target. I was smarter than the other kids, and I loved to show them. I showed them every chance I got. Of course, that didn't help, did it? So I was always on the fringe. I had no friends, and I knew it. And I learned not even to try to fit in, because I never would. And I became as ugly on the inside as they said I was on the outside. My parents tried to ease the pain. Parents, what's the old saying? You love your children even if they're ugly? Mine did. But I knew it was because they were my parents and they had no choice. I had brothers. They ignored me. I guess they loved me, but they would never show it when anyone could see, because they were afraid their friends would ostracize them as well. They could avoid being rejected. I couldn't. They played games, they made friends, they went to parties. I stayed at home and I studied. And all the while I had fantasies. I had dreams of what I would do to make those bullies pay when I finally had the opportunity. And I knew if I worked hard, someday I would have that opportunity. So I immersed myself. I became the best at math. I could speak and write and read in Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, and Latin as clearly as any scholar anywhere. I studied philosophy. I could think very clearly. I even studied religion academically, not personally, because I had no interest in any God who clearly didn't care about me. After all, Everything I could feel made me sense that I had been ignored at best. I got older, my brothers got older. They had girlfriends and were popular. They went to parties. They were always the center of everything, but not me. So I retreated even further into my studies. I got interested in business and politics. I studied Rome, and I knew how all of the intricacies worked there. I knew how the agencies worked. I knew who you had to be careful around and who you could push around. I learned how the system worked and studied how I could make it work for me. I had a plan. I would become a tax collector. Everyone hated tax collectors. Everyone saw them as traitors to our people, but everybody hated me anyway, so who cared? That was the pathway that I could follow to get back at anyone. It would give me opportunity for revenge, for payback. I could hurt them, and they would have no recourse. Because not only would my treatment of them be legal, I would have the power of Rome behind me. And they would fear me. Rightly so. I would be rich. I would be powerful. I could take from them whatever I wanted. I had all of the qualifications. I could speak all of the important languages. I was good with math, but most of all, I had no ties with anyone that would make me moral. And I had rage within. I did well. I enjoyed watching them struggle. Sometimes I pushed a little harder just because I could. Sometimes I would make them hurt just like they had made me hurt. Sometimes I would make them hurt because I imagined, had I known them as a child, they would have been bullies just like everyone else. And it felt good. It felt good for a while. The ache always came back. I was located in a really good place to be a tax collector. Jericho was right on all of the major trade routes, and I could take a little bit from every caravan that went by, or a lot. And every person who was in town, I had power. If they looked at me wrongly, I had power to break them. I could tax them into destitution. You see, the way it worked was Rome gave me a quota that I had to meet, but beyond that, I could take whatever I wanted. And no one could stop me. Because if they tried, I would snap my fingers and the Roman legions would come. I became rich. Really, really rich. Eventually, I married. Now, you can imagine that no woman would want to marry me, and no family would want their daughter to marry me, but you have to remember that in my time and place, marriage had to do with power and money and connections, and I had all three in spades. I could get any wife I wanted. Literally. And I did. I had the pick of all of the most beautiful young women. What do you call them in your society? Trophies? I had a trophy. At first, for a long time, my wife hated me for making her an outsider. She enjoyed the big, beautiful house. She enjoyed all of the things I could buy. She enjoyed servants who would wait on her every wish. And she tolerated me as she had to. But she also feared me. because she knew that I could hurt her just as I hurt everyone else. Well, now she's confused. Because I'm not the same person I used to be. I'm still short and I guess I'm still ugly, but I'm not a troll any longer. Now the pain never really went away, no matter how rich I became, no matter how much revenge I exacted, no matter how I separated myself from these other people, it always came back in the dark of the night. Well, I found myself going back and studying religions again, hoping that something would offer me hope. None did. Until I came upon this little story that happened in my hometown of Jericho. There was this woman, her name was Rahab. She was a cult prostitute. That is, she worked in a temple for a foreign god, giving her body to men as a way to try to make the ground more fertile. She was an outsider to Israel, if ever there was one. And as Israel was coming into the land, the army of people gathered around Jericho, and they sent spies into the city, and Rahab kept them safe. And because of that, Joshua said to her, Rahab, you and your family will be spared when God gives us this city, and you will become part of the people of God. It was astounding. She was more an outsider than anyone could possibly be, and yet she was welcomed into the community of faith. She was loved by God in spite of everything that she had been and everything she had done. That story caught my imagination, and I found myself feeling hope. I found myself fantasizing that someday I would find myself in a position where even though I had done all of these things that everyone knew were terrible, that God would reach out to me. Sometimes I'd be sitting there in front of my ledgers with all of these numbers in front of me and realize I'd been dreaming for hours and doing no work. I heard stories about a preacher named Jesus, that he healed the sick, that he touched lepers. Nobody does that. That he made the lame walk and the blind see. That he taught women. Can you imagine? That he would allow children to come and sit on his lap and he would listen to their concerns. And that through all of it, he spoke of God's love. He spoke of a new kingdom where all people experienced God's shalom. And he preached good news to the poor. Now, I certainly wasn't poor in things. But if you can be poor in heart, I was. What's the song say? Some people are so poor, all they have is money. He was an outsider himself. He wasn't a priest. He wasn't educated. He wasn't part of the power structures. He was a son of a carpenter, someone who had had to give their land away, sell their land, because they had nothing at all. But somehow he knew God's heart. And he said that God loved the outsiders even more than those on the inside. That was good news even for me. He was coming to Jericho. I had to hear him. I knew it wouldn't be safe. The streets, they were crowded normally. They would be incredibly so at that point in time. There were lots of people who hated me, lots who wanted me dead. It was understandable. And yet, I had to go. I had taken their homes. I had hurt them deeply. I had taxed some of them to the very edge. They had reason to hate me, but I had to risk it. They would all be there. Jesus spoke to them. Good news to the poor? They were the poor. Good news to those who lived on the edge. They lived on the edge every day. They would be there. They didn't realize how similar we were once you got past the surface stuff. I needed to hear him. I was afraid I'd be disappointed. I was afraid that he would look at me and he would condemn me and I would never recover. But I was also afraid that if I didn't go, I would miss my one chance of being whole. So I braved the streets. I braved the crowds. Luckily, they were all intent on seeing Jesus. They almost didn't notice me, but more than once someone did, and I felt a well-placed elbow or knee, in spite of the fact that I had all of my bodyguards there. The crowds were as large as any I'd ever seen. And you remember, I'm short. I couldn't see over the crowd. I couldn't see anything. And I heard the murmuring begin. He's coming! He's coming! I tried to see him. I couldn't. But there was a tree, a sycamore tree, not very large, but large enough. And I pushed my way through the crowd and climbed. Can you imagine that? Here I was, a Roman official, the chief tax collector, in silk robes that cost more than most of the people in the crowd made in an entire year, and I was climbing a tree like a child. The rope caught and tore, and I didn't even notice until later. I heard him preach. It was all true. There was a love in his eyes that stirred my soul. There were words spoken that dug their way into my heart and made their home there forever. He pointed the children and said, "The kingdom of God belongs to you, these little street urchins with no hope or dreams beyond surviving till the next day." He embraced the poor and blessed them. He touched those with illnesses, some of which were so horrible that we all turned away. And yet, he loved them. And the Pharisees who were there in all of their righteousness, he called them to compassion, to caring, to loving, to being holy instead of just play acting. He said, "God is happier over the salvation of one sinner than over all of your righteousness." Pharisees, it was amazing. It was all I had hoped and all I had dreamt, and I kept thinking, maybe me too. And then I heard another voice from the bottom of the tree. "Do you think those words are for you, traitor? A man who has hurt so many, who has destroyed so many lives, who has only made things worse and never better. Do you think those words are for you?" And I looked down and I saw the face of a man from whom I had taken almost everything. Almost everything. In a moment, I fell deeper into hell than I had ever been in my entire life. He was right. I didn't deserve grace. I didn't deserve forgiveness. I didn't deserve love. I certainly didn't deserve forgiveness or inclusion. Everything went blank. I didn't hear anything for, I don't know, seconds, minutes, hours. I just stood there in the tree with the tears streaming down my face. And then I heard another voice, "Zaccheaus! Zaccheaus! Come down. Tonight, I'm staying at your house." Jesus was speaking to me. He knew my name. He was coming to my house. Silence fell over the crowd, and then the grumbling began as they started to realize what was going on. Why in the world would Jesus go to his house? Doesn't he know who he is? Isn't this man a prophet? Can't he tell? This is the worst of sinners. This man is a traitor. This man has made a profession out of hurting people. What is wrong with Jesus? And Jesus protected me. It was like my mother, only better. Because he didn't have to. And he went to my house. And we ate. And we talked. And we laughed. And I cried. And we ate some more and talked some more and laughed some more. And I cried some more. And I sat with him. I sat with him. The next morning, I woke and realized I had slept through the night. I don't remember the last time that happened. Maybe it never happened. And I heard the birds singing, and I realized the rage was gone. The pain was gone. I realized I wasn't alone. For the first time, I was loved as I was. That God loved me. Zaccheaus. I gave half of what I owned away that day to the poor. And I said to Jesus, if there's anyone that I have defrauded, I will repay them fourfold. There were lots of them. The first home I went to was the man at the base of the tree. And I knocked on his door, and he came to the door, and he looked at me with surprise, with anger, with hatred. And I knelt and I asked him to forgive me. And I repaid him fourfold what I had taken. I'm still a tax collector. What else would I do? It's what I know. I'm fair. And people, they seem to respect that. I mean, I don't think there are any other fair tax collectors in all of Rome. Just me. Now, I live in a modest house with no servants. And I give away as much as I take in. Because I know the folk around me, they're outsiders just like I was. They're just trying to find a way in. And if I can help open that door, I want to do that. Now my wife, it's funny, she's confused because I'm not the man she married. She's much more than a trophy now, and she's not always sure what to do with that. I sit and I listen to her, and you know what I've discovered? She's smart. Who knew? Who knew? But more than that, she's compassionate. She might actually be falling in love with me now. Imagine that. I am a different person. Now, I don't know whether you can identify with any of that, but one piece is important that you hear. Whoever you are, whatever you have done, wherever you have been, whatever you have experienced, there is one thing that I know. You are loved by God. And that God's arms are wide enough to welcome any of us who would come. Will you join me?